Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Linda Lang.
Hi, this is Linda Lang from ThoughtChange.com. Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. Today, we are talking with Forrest Rivers. Forrest is a spiritual teacher and a writer who's just written a book about the COVID pandemic and humanity's spiritual awakening. So welcome, Forrest.
Hi, Linda. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, I'm really curious, Forrest, what inspired you to write a book about COVID from a spiritual perspective?
So when we all went on lockdown last March in 2020, I remember immediately, like everybody, tuning into the news online, and the only narrative I saw was one of fear and anxiety, just an overwhelming sense of negativity. And understandably, there's been a lot of suffering, and I never want to underplay that. There's been a lot of suffering, whether you've lost loved ones, recovering from COVID itself, if you've had it. If you're Native American, your indigenous people, your communities have been destroyed from this, people who have been out of work, there's a lot of suffering. So I don't want to underplay that. But all I saw back in March was all this fear and paranoia. And I wanted to bring forth a perspective that would inspire hope and faith in humanity, and to show that, hey, despite all this suffering, despite all this hardship, this is a real opportunity for us to kind of turn within and use this for spiritual growth and grow in our awareness. In the book, I outline the various ways in which we could use this for our own awakening.
Forrest, I found that myself as well. And because life was so busy before COVID hit, for me personally, I felt it cocooning, and it was a very nurturing time. Of course, the world was really gripped by fear. And again, I don't want to downplay the suffering that many people have experienced and how it's touched everyone's lives. But I tend to focus on this time really as a time where we had to take that extra time and space to really go inside and feel what was important to us, what mattered.
People were searching for more meaning, Linda. You couldn't put that any better. In the book, I fill it with antidotes of people talking to me about how they use this time to set up gardening practices, moving off the grid to try a different style of sustainable living, people exploring their art and music during this time. I even talked to one person who took to the Appalachian Trail, which is not far from where I live out here, who was like, no better time. There's not anybody out here this year. It's safe, and this is a great time to explore things. Even my father, who was very much stuck in that business mindset, corporate mindset for many years, I've seen him even starting to explore his passions and finding what really brings meaning to his life. He retired during this time, which is an interesting time to do that. So in that quietude you're talking about, that stillness, what an amazing time for that. We had a chance to really turn within ourselves and not only find more meaning in our lives, but also reflect on the greater flow of life. Outside the spiritual community, death is usually something that we try to hide away in our society. But the fact of the matter is during this pandemic, many of us in our homes were forced to confront the reality of death and what that means in our overall life and journey. And every spiritual faith talks about, if you can come to terms with your own death, you can live life more fully and with a greater sense of purpose. And that was one of the most, I think, incredible and profound things that came out of this. And again, not to downplay the suffering people have experienced with death. But there's a real opportunity here, and has been, for kind of like a rebirth of the soul, if you will.
That's really beautiful. So, what do you think this awakening is in humanity? I do think that a lot of people in the spiritual community kind of knew an awakening was coming. They maybe didn't see it play out this way or imagine it play out this way.
I think we all, I think many of us, like you said, Linda, perfectly, we all saw this coming, this major event that would go a long way in shifting consciousness. Now, the actual event itself, what would be the actual catalyst? I don't think anyone could have accurately predicted it would be a pandemic. And I think anyone who says that is kind of full of it, right? If they say, "Oh, I knew it was going to be the pandemic," no. But if we could take a further step back, like a more like cosmic perspective, we would see that the pandemic was almost in some ways, I would say, destined, or part of our wheel of karma, a light post that was sort of like put here as the logical flow in the sequence of universal karma. And this event was put there, I think, to jolt us out of our sense of complacency, our kind of like almost like, I guess I'd say our stubborn selfishness that's pervaded throughout the world, and our illusion of separation. And this has made us definitely reconsider that. Oh wow, we really might be more interconnected than we think we are.
In a crazy sort of way, I think it's reconnected us to life.
It's making us realize that rather than being above nature, we are of nature. It gave us this opportunity to slow down for a period and make us really consider, oh, wow, we are part of that life flow. We are part of that universal flow. We're part of that Tao, the greater cosmic flow. And I think a lot of people, whether they have the words to really describe it, felt that, even for people who weren't spiritual or considered themselves on the path, though I would argue we're always on the path. It's just where we are in terms of acknowledging it.
I agree. I agree. I think another thing that happened was that humanity's compassion got triggered.
Oh, how could it not? When the pandemic started, we saw immediately what was happening on a grand scale. We saw what was happening in Italy. We saw what happened in Britain, here, Canada. We saw what's now happening in India. It's almost like for so long we were able to kind of ignore suffering. Well, it's happening over there, not here. Everything's fine in my area. Not anymore. This thing touched everybody. It aroused that compassion within all of us. And then in our communities, we all know someone who's been hit by this, whether it's someone who's lost a job, or someone who has died, or someone who's gotten terribly sick, or the terrible mental health toll this has taken on people. We all know somebody who suffered, and that has helped us grow in our compassion. In a weird kind of way, Linda, there's a great quote that I think symbolizes this whole period. It was from the great and late Ram Dass. God rest his soul. He's one of the most beautiful spiritual teachers. Touched my life. Everything I've read and heard by him, it's just unbelievable, authentic, and beautiful. But he said, suffering is the sandpaper of our awakening. And, I think that quote, it's interesting. He passed away almost right before, 3 months before the pandemic began, yet his words could not be more accurate to describe it. Suffering is the sandpaper of our awakening, and that's helped us grow in our compassion.
Well, I guess we're definitely awakening.
I think so. I think so. I just hope we take the lessons from this and keep moving forward, which I think we will.
How do you think this will actually change humanity on a global or a social scale or individual?
Out of this individually, more of us are going to be searching for meaning in our lives. During this pandemic, I've been teaching classes in my day job, and I've had a lot of interaction with young people. And one thing I've been noticing among all the young people during this pandemic is that they're coming to that quick realization, I can't just do something with my time that just makes me money. That's not going to make me happy. I need to do something that is more of service and that brings meaning. I've never seen that on such a wide scale among the young people. And I've been teaching for over 10 years and I've never seen that. It's always up to the pandemic. It was always, I got to go get whatever the highest paying job is. That's my emphasis in life. So I think one thing we're going to see out of this is more of a focus on inner work. What brings meaning and where can we find that service? And I think we're going to see a lot more of that individually. Collectively, I think we're going to realize that we can't build societies around sort of what I would call like unrestrained profit over people. We can't be living in societies where we have massive homeless populations and massive inequality between rich and poor. And as we've had more time to kind of reconnect with how you described it beautifully, life, the flow of life, we're going to realize that we can't keep treating the earth the way that we've been doing. So I think you're going to see a lot more movement on the collective level towards addressing more of the savage inequalities that lead to suffering. But in the end, I think most importantly, that can't happen unless people individually awaken, because all the collective is a reflection of our individual states of consciousness. And I think that this event has altered our individual states of consciousness for the positive moving forward. And I don't think there will be a return to, quote, normal. I hope there's not. Actually, I hope the normal is a more mindful, spiritually in tuned people.
Heart-based.
Heart-based. Not all up here, but the balance between here and here.
Yeah, I agree. So what guidance do you give those students that come to you for counseling, or what guidance would you have for the listeners to really help them step into that place within themselves that will foster that sense of unity, consciousness, and contribution?
Such a beautiful question. There's some practices that one can do to find their center of connection to all things. And finding that center will immediately fill you with that yearning to serve and to help and inspire. Some of those practices are meditation. I think this is a wonderful time to start meditation practice or prayer. This is a wonderful time for that. Incredible opportunity. And that's something that I think everybody could benefit from is meditation. Another practice is making time to commune with nature, whether that be through gardening, whether that be through hiking, swimming, whatever it may be, photography, going out into nature and engaging in photography. Nature is one of the most soul enriching, connecting practices anyone can do. And I recommend spending time in nature in solitude to start with, to really foster that sense of connection. And then, of course, creative expression. Creativity and the heart are directly related together. To create comes from the impulse to share the passion of the spirit. I think this is a great time too to start writing, start making music, start painting. This is a wonderful time for all of that. Those are just some practices off the top of my head that will help us foster a sense of connection. And of course, the ultimate of all practices, use this opportunity safely to volunteer. There is no better time to volunteer than now. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the most beautiful mystic texts in the Hindu faith, Krishna encourages his disciple Arjuna to live a life of service. He says service is the most direct pathway to God, the deepest connection to the One. So this is a wonderful time to become useful and to serve. And that service will bring you into that heart space immediately. I'd say those are the most profound things we can do right now.
Well, I don't know. I think it's put me into a very zen place just listening to you, Forrest.
Oh, thank you for creating this space for us to have this conversation.
Well, I think it's important. There's still quite a bit of fear in media and in people's conversations. And I think they need to know that there's light around, that they can choose to step into the light instead of stepping into the darkness. And I'm not saying to throw caution to the wind. It's simply about where you're putting your spirit. Are you feeding fear or are you feeding the light?
Wow, what a wonderful, wonderful comment. And we always have the choice, don't we, Linda, to embrace the darkness or to embrace the light. And that is one of the most crucial things that this pandemic has taught us, that where we center our awareness is the reality that will manifest. And we better be really careful where we focus our awareness from. It doesn't mean we push the suffering away. It means that we use the suffering for our own awakening. And that's a very positive perspective. But we got to be careful with where we center our awareness, because that going down that dark path, it turns into a vicious cycle, which ends up creating, more negative outcomes, as we all know. My message to listeners here would be to say, keep your head up, stay inspired, be faithful, fear not the future, and know that everything that's happened up to this point is exactly how it was supposed to happen. Because I really, really, truly believe, Linda, nothing in this universe is by accident. Nothing. And I think that this has a purpose. When we look, like I said, we could take that far cosmic perspective, we would see that COVID was designed as our light post. I don't mean designed in a conspiratorial sense. I mean cosmically ordained in some ways, or even for people who prefer different language, it's just the natural course of our karma to awaken us out of our illusion of separateness. Taking that perspective, how can we not have hope moving forward? Not the only one. I have a feeling many more catalysts are coming, but this is one big catalyst that is pushing us in a more positive, loving, compassionate direction. And I think 20 years down the road, 25 years down the road, however long that may be, we'll look back at this and say, that was a pretty important moment in terms of shifting our consciousness.
And perhaps if we make the best of this transition, then maybe the future steps can be a little bit easier for humanity.
It doesn't have to be so dramatic like we've seen. I mean, 2020 was essentially one giant drama. It was as if the actors on the stage all lost their minds. But you know what? We needed to have that drama to kind of wake us up. The universe was almost saying, hello, guys. I've been trying to get your attention for a while. This will do it now.
And no man is left behind, right? This is a transition the whole world is going through.
There was a wonderful book written by the Christian mystic Thomas Merton. And the name of the book was No Man is an Island. And that has definitely rung true during this whole pandemic.
Absolutely. It's been really delightful talking with you, Forrest. Is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners today?
I just want to say I'm very grateful for this opportunity to speak with you today. And I think that these kinds of conversations will help us immensely in shifting our consciousness in a more positive and loving direction. And I think the space that you provide for this is immensely important. And I just want to say to the listeners, stay inspired, stay faithful, and know that great things are around the corner for yourself and for humanity. And while it may seem dark right now, the light will come, and it's already here.
I agree. It's like before we can have clarity, we go through a period of confusion. There seems to be a bit of turmoil before we get to that next level that we need to be at.
We can't have the light without the dark, and we can't have spring without the winter. These are natural passages of life to pass through difficult periods that test our will, test our faith, and then we transcend, we grow, we evolve. It's no different with matters of the spirit than it is with the scientific theory of evolution. It's a path that we have to take. It's a path that's happening. And we choose the attitude of awareness or the level of awareness we meet that with. And I have faith that we're going to be okay. And not only okay, we're going to evolve into the next stage of our conscious evolution with a greater sense of awareness of our inner connection to each other, the earth, and to the one with many names.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, Forrest, please tell us the name of your book and how people can learn more about you.
Sure. The name of the book again is COVID-19 and Humanity's Spiritual Awakening. And it's available on Amazon. If you don't like Amazon, the book is also available through my independent publisher, Conscious Living Media. You can find me on forrestrivers.com. I have a website. I keep a daily blog, just of little inspirationals called Mindful Musings, poems, uplifting words, short stories. And you can find me on Facebook as well. And I just want to thank you again for this absolutely wonderful, delightful opportunity to be with you and your listeners today.
Well, thank you, Forrest. I think that it's a service to all humanity if we can help people to reframe the current circumstances and people can see some benefit, because there actually has been quite a bit of benefit environmentally. Families and friends are appreciating each other more.
Isn't that wild? We all took each other for granted. And now we know, we're like, wow, it's the relationships in our lives that really matter.
And even shopping, I mean, people aren't able to shop as much. And I mean, did we really need all that stuff to begin with? So who knows?
You raise a good question. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you again for being my guest.
Thank you so much, Linda. I appreciate every moment of this.
And thank you for listening to this week's edition of Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. You will find all of our conversations on YouTube, Apple Podcast, or at thoughtchange.com. Come and visit me there and learn what energy medicine can do for you. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now. We hope you enjoy exploring the mystical side of life with us. Remember to subscribe and stay tuned for more conversations.